The small provincial town lived its usual life. Residents knew each other, and everything around seemed predictable and calm. The morning sun illuminated the quiet streets, along which school children hurried ready for a new day. Michael Lawson, a history teacher at a local school, was a respected man. His lessons were always filled with interesting facts and stories that made students look at the past with new interest. Colleagues valued him for his professionalism and kindness, and students for his ability to make complex topics understandable and exciting. Among his students was Katherine Miller, a quiet and diligent girl who showed a special interest in history. She often asked questions in class and sought to learn more than the school curriculum offered. Katherine spent a lot of time in the library, studying additional materials and preparing for Olympiads. One day after class, Katherine approached Michael to ask for book recommendations on the topic they were studying. Michael, delighted by her enthusiasm, suggested some of his favorite authors and shared additional resources. He saw her potential and desire to learn, which inspired him to help her develop her abilities. Gradually, their interactions became more frequent. Katherine would come after class to discuss what she had read and ask questions. Michael was happy to share his knowledge with such an interested student. Their conversations touched not only on the material, but also on general topics about life, art, and dreams for the future. They both treasured these moments of connection. For Michael, it was an opportunity to inspire a younger generation, and for Katherine, to find a mentor who understood her aspirations. But neither could have foreseen what these encounters would lead to in the future. Michael Lawson was a history teacher at a small town school. He was respected and appreciated by both his colleagues and students. Michael always tried to make lessons interesting and exciting so that each student could better understand and remember the material. He was the one who helped students to reach their potential and strive for everyone to feel confident in their knowledge. Michael was born and raised in an ordinary family and was always attracted to history. Already at a young age, he decided that he would become a teacher because he saw it as an opportunity to share his knowledge and inspire students. His passion for history was genuine, and it was felt in every lesson. Michael found his work at the school rewarding and enthusiastic about educational activities. He often stayed after school to help those who needed additional explanations. His colleagues considered him to be a caring and considerate person, and parents were grateful for his attention to their students. However, outside of school, his personal life was less eventful. Michael was focused on his work and did not socialize much outside of school. He was lonely but tried not to show it to others. His life was built around work and hobbies that occupied his free time. Michael saw his students as the future of the generation and always tried to give them more than just the knowledge from textbooks. It was important to him that each student understood that studying history is not just memorizing facts, but understanding how the past affects the present. His lessons were filled with real-life examples that helped them better perceive the information. Among all his students, there was one girl who particularly caught his attention with her diligence and interest in the subject. Katherine Miller was a quiet but very determined student. She often stayed after class to ask additional questions or discuss what she had read. Michael began to notice her diligence and decided to help her more than the other students. Their communication began with discussions of academic topics, and Michael was happy that he could help a student who showed such interest in the subject. However, over time, their meetings became more frequent and their conversations went beyond academics. Michael realized that his attention to the student had become too personal, but he could not find the strength to stop this communication. Katherine Miller was one of those students who rarely attracted attention from others. She did not stand out among her peers, quiet, modest, always in the shadows. In class, she was difficult to notice. She sat at the back of the class, alone, intently writing down every word the teacher said. She was not interested in noisy companies or parties after classes. She spent her time in the library, among books, immersed in reading. Katherine was born into an ordinary family, but her relationship with her parents was not the best. They were busy with their own lives, work, household chores, and often did not notice that their daughter needed their attention. Katherine grew up feeling lonely. Her world was limited to the pages of books, where she looked for answers to questions that no one around her could or did not want to give. She preferred to live in her imagination, where she felt safe. She had few friends at school. Her classmates were busy with their own things, socializing in groups, and Katherine did not strive to be part of this circle. She was an introvert who preferred to spend time in silence. This did not mean that she did not want to communicate, but she did not know how to establish contact with others. She tried to find herself through her studies, and it was history that became the subject that attracted her the most. When Katherine came to Michael Lawson's history lessons, she immediately noticed that his lessons were different from others. He didn't just tell dry facts, but brought historical events to life, making them accessible and exciting. Katherine admired his knowledge and approach to teaching. He was one of the few teachers who knew how to grab her attention and make her think. It was in his lessons that she felt she could ask a question and get a detailed answer, not just a stock phrase. Their interactions began as a normal learning process. Katherine often stayed after class to ask questions or request additional study materials. Michael was pleased that one of his students was so interested in his subject. He began to spend more time with Katherine, sharing books he had read with her, telling her stories that went beyond the curriculum. Katherine, who had been feeling lonely, quickly became attached to these meetings. It was something new for her, attention that she had not received from her family or peers. She began to see Michael not only as a teacher, but as someone she could trust, someone she could talk to. It was the connection she had been missing in her life. Every meeting with him became an important event for her. She looked forward to the moment when she could discuss the next book with him or ask him her questions. However, the more she interacted with Michael, the more she began to feel that their relationship was going beyond the usual teacher-student relationship. Katherine knew it was wrong, but she couldn't resist the warmth and attention she was receiving. It was something new for her, something she had never experienced before. Her feelings for Michael were growing, but she was afraid to admit even to herself what these feelings were. For her, it was a way out of the emotional void she had been living in. For the first time in her life, she felt understood, that she mattered to someone. These meetings became a point for her, something she looked forward to every day. She began staying after school more and more often, and Michael didn't mind. He saw her as a capable student, and perhaps, deep down, he also felt that these meetings had become something more than just lessons. Katherine, although withdrawn and quiet, had a delicate mental organization. Her experiences were deep, but she never shared them with anyone. She was used to keeping everything to herself, but in communicating with Michael, she found a certain outlet. She could talk with him about what worried her, what troubled her, and he always found the right words. She believed that he understood her like no one else. Over time, her feelings for him began to evolve into something more. She wanted to spend more time with him, to discuss not only books but also personal matters. She began to wonder, what does she mean to Michael? Does he see her as just a student or something more? These thoughts began to fill her mind. Her affection grew stronger. Katherine began to realize that this wasn't just friendship or respect for her teacher. For the first time in her life, she began to feel something more complex, emotions she couldn't quite describe. But with each passing day, the feeling grew stronger, and she couldn't shake it. After a few months of additional work with Michael, Katherine changed noticeably. Her interest in history turned into a real passion, and it did not go unnoticed. She began to actively participate in lessons, asking deep questions, and even offering her own ideas for projects. Her classmates marveled at her transformation, and her teachers praised her diligence and curiosity. Michael was pleased to see such results. He felt proud of Katherine and knew that his efforts were not in vain. Together, they began working on a research project for a school conference. The topic of the project concerned little-studied events in local history, which required collecting information from various sources, including archives and interviews with local residents. They spent a lot of time in the school library, immersing themselves in old books and documents. Katherine offered fresh ideas, and Michael guided her, helping her structure the materials and share his knowledge. Their collaboration was fruitful and inspiring for both. As part of the project, they decided to visit the local history museum. The excursion turned out to be very useful. They discovered rare exhibits and documents that could add value to their work. The museum curator, having learned about their project, offered to help them and provided access to closed archives. Katherine began to feel more confident not only in her studies, but also in her interactions with others. She made friends with classmates who were also interested in history and participated in various school events. Together, they organized a history club where they discussed different eras, watched documentaries, and prepared presentations. Michael supported the students' initiative and became the club's curator. He encouraged their desire for knowledge and offered new forms of learning: debates, role-playing games, thematic excursions. This helped to unite the class and increase interest in the subject. At the same time, Katherine began to think about her future. She realized that she wanted to connect her life with history and perhaps become a researcher or teacher. Michael noticed her aspirations and offered to help her prepare for university. He told her about various programs, scholarships, and opportunities that could open doors to the world of science for her. They began working on a preparation plan, making a list of required exams, choosing topics for additional research, and mapping out a study schedule. Katherine was enthusiastic and ready to work hard to achieve her goal. However, life is not always smooth. Soon, Katherine faced unexpected difficulties. Her parents, noticing that she was spending a lot of time studying and doing extracurricular activities, began to worry. They believed that their daughter was too overloaded and needed more rest. In addition, they were not sure that a career in history would provide her with a stable future. One evening, over family dinner, Katherine tried to discuss her future plans with her parents. She told them about her successes, about the project with Michael, about her desire to go to a prestigious university. However, her parents met her words with distrust. They suggested that she consider more practical professions, which, in their opinion, would be more reliable. Katherine felt frustrated and misunderstood. She felt that her parents did not see her efforts and did not appreciate her dreams. In search of support, she turned to Michael. He listened to her, shared his thoughts, and advised her not to give up. Michael offered to meet with her parents and discuss the prospects to dispel their doubts. The meeting took place in the school office. Michael told Katherine's parents about her achievements, her potential, and the opportunities that were open to her. He emphasized that their support was important to her success. The parents listened attentively, and gradually their attitude began to change. They saw how serious their daughter was and how much she had already done to realize her dream. After this conversation, the atmosphere in the family improved. Katherine's parents became more involved in her life, took an interest in her progress, and even attended a school conference where she presented her project. After seeing their daughter's performance and receiving positive feedback from teachers and other parents, they felt proud and admitted that they were wrong in their doubts. Meanwhile, the school conference was a big event. Katherine and Michael's project was highly praised by the jury and attracted the attention of university representatives who were present at the event. Katherine was invited to take part in a regional competition for young researchers, which was a big step towards her dream. Michael continued to support Katherine, but he tried to give her more independence. He understood that she had to learn to make decisions and move forward on her own. Their relationship moved to a new level of professional mentoring, where each of them grew and developed. However, there were still many trials and new opportunities ahead of them that would test their strength and show how ready they were for changes in life. After a successful presentation at a school conference and an invitation to a regional competition for young researchers, Katherine felt that her dreams were beginning to take shape. However, with opportunities came new challenges. Preparing for the competition required even more attention and time. The project needed to be expanded, research deepened, and a powerful presentation prepared. Katherine knew she had a lot of work ahead of her. She created a detailed plan of action, assigned tasks, and set deadlines. Michael continued to mentor her, but now he wanted to give her more autonomy. He believed that Katherine could handle any challenge and wanted her to build her self-confidence. However, not everything went smoothly. Exams started at school and the workload increased. Katherine tried to keep up with everything, but sometimes she felt that her strength was running out. Her classmates noticed that she had become more withdrawn and focused, but they understood that she was preparing for an important event and tried to support her. The History Club organized a special meeting for her, where everyone shared their ideas and suggestions for her project. One evening, while working on a project at the library, Katherine discovered that some of the documents she needed were not available in the local archives. This was a serious problem, since without this data, her research might be incomplete. She shared her concerns with Michael. He suggested that they contact the regional archives, which might hold the necessary materials. But another difficulty arose. The archive was in another city, and Katherine needed her parents' permission to travel. She was a little worried about how they would react to her request. Gathering her courage, she approached them over dinner. "Mom, Dad, I have the opportunity to visit the regional archive for my project. It is very important for preparing for the competition. Can I go there on the weekend?" The parents looked at each other. The father asked, "Are you sure this is necessary? It's quite far and you've never traveled alone." "Yes, Dad. Without these materials, my project will be incomplete. The museum curator and Michael think this is an important step." The mother added, "Maybe someone could go with you. I would feel calmer if you weren't alone." Katherine thought about it. She didn't want to disturb her friends, knowing that everyone had their own plans. Then she suggested, "I can ask Michael to accompany me. He has already worked with these archives and will be able to help me with the search." The parents agreed, realizing that the trip would be safer with the teacher. They discussed the details and gave their permission. On Saturday morning, Katherine and Michael set off on their journey. The drive was long, but the time flew by as they talked about history and made plans for the competition. Arriving at the regional archive, they immediately got to work. The huge halls with endless shelves of books and documents impressed Katherine. She felt like a real explorer discovering new horizons. Michael showed her how to work with archival materials, how to take notes and organize information. They spent the entire day reading old documents, photographing and copying necessary pages. Katherine found several rare records that could be key to her research. Upon returning home, she felt a huge surge of inspiration. New data had opened up unexpected aspects of the topic, and she threw herself into the project. Michael continued to support her, answering questions and guiding her in the right direction. However, the intense work began to take its toll on her health. One morning, Katherine woke up feeling tired and had a headache. Her mother noticed her pale appearance and suggested that she stay home and rest. But Katherine insisted on going to school, as the time before the competition was getting shorter. Her condition worsened during the day. She felt ill during one of her lessons, and her teacher sent her to the infirmary. The school doctor recommended that she return home and take a few days off. Michael, upon learning of this, also advised her not to overexert herself. Katherine realized that she had overestimated her strength. She decided to listen to advice and take a break. At home, she tried to sleep more, spent time with her family, and read books for the soul. Her parents surrounded her with care, and this helped her recover. During her vacation, she realized how important it is to maintain a balance between work and rest. She reorganized her schedule, setting aside time for walks, meeting with friends, and simply relaxing. This helped her return to work with renewed energy. Preparations for the competition entered the final stage. Katherine completed the project, prepared a presentation, and rehearsed the performance in front of a mirror and loved ones. Michael organized a trial performance for her at a history club, where she received valuable advice and support from her peers. The day of the competition arrived. The large hall was full of participants and guests. Katherine was nervous, but she felt confident in her abilities. When it was her turn, she went on stage and began her speech. Her story was emotional, filled with interesting facts and conclusions. She managed to captivate the audience, and at the end of the presentation, the hall exploded with applause. The jury praised her work, noting the depth of her research and the originality of her approach. Katherine received a prize and an invitation to participate in the national competition. This was a huge achievement, which she had never dreamed of. After the award ceremony, university representatives approached her and asked to discuss admission and scholarship opportunities. Katherine was over the moon. Her dreams were starting to come true. When she returned home, she thanked Michael for his support and mentorship. He congratulated her and said, "I always believed in you. You proved that persistence and hard work lead to success. I am glad that I could be a part of your journey." Katherine replied, "Without your help, I wouldn't have been able to achieve this. Thank you for everything." They both knew there was still a lot of work and challenges ahead, but now Katherine was ready for them. She learned to overcome difficulties, accept support, and maintain faith in herself. Her relationship with her parents strengthened. She found friends and decided on her future profession. After her success in the competition and recognition from the university, Katherine's life gradually began to change. She gained self-confidence, and this was reflected not only in her studies, but also in her relationships with others. Her parents now supported her dreams and helped her prepare for university. School became a place where she felt successful and respected. However, with this success came new challenges. The more Katherine immersed herself in her studies and preparation for university, the more time she spent studying rather than hanging out with her friends. Many of her classmates who had previously admired her determination now began to notice that she had become more distant. Even the members of the history club, who had previously helped her with her preparation, began to feel a sense of distance. Katherine was focused on her plans and did not notice how she was gradually becoming isolated from those around her. During this time, Michael continued to act as her mentor, but their meetings became less frequent. He understood that Katherine was preparing for a new stage in her life and was trying to give her more independence. At the same time, he noticed that Katherine was becoming increasingly vulnerable to stress. Every day, she balanced the demands of school, preparation for university, and personal experiences. One source of tension was the atmosphere at school itself. Classmates began to notice that Katherine was spending a lot of time with Michael. At first, no one was bothered by this, since everyone knew that she was preparing for competitions and exams. But when their meetings continued after the competition, rumors began to circulate. Some of her classmates whispered that Katherine was enjoying special attention from Michael, that their relationship went beyond that of a simple teacher and student. Katherine, immersed in her plans, did not immediately notice the change in her relationships with her classmates. She felt increasingly lonely and emotionally tense. At school, she often caught glances at her that were previously unfamiliar to her. Instead of the usual support, she felt that people around her began to discuss her behind her back. This feeling of alienation was new and unpleasant for her. She could not understand why everything had suddenly changed. One day, during recess, Katherine approached a group of her classmates with whom she had previously been on good terms. They were sitting at a table in the school cafeteria, discussing something with smiles and jokes. When Katherine approached, the conversation died down. The girls exchanged glances, and one of them, not hiding her sarcasm, said, "Oh, look who's come to visit us. Aren't you too busy with your individual lessons with the teacher?" The words hit her like a blow. Katherine was at a loss for how to respond. She tried to smile and say something back, but she felt her heart clench. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the cafeteria. She couldn't believe that her friends were looking at her like that. Her mind began to race. What did they mean? What private lessons? Later that day, during one of Michael's extracurricular activities, Katherine finally decided to talk to him about what had happened. She told him about what was bothering her and that there were some nasty rumors going around the school. Michael listened carefully, realizing that the situation was getting out of hand. He knew that their frequent meetings could arouse suspicion, but he hoped that it wouldn't become a problem. "Katherine," he said quietly, "I understand how you feel. I want you to know that such rumors often arise when people see someone standing out. You have achieved a lot, and some may be jealous of you, but you must not pay attention to such talk." Katherine nodded, but inside she couldn't shake the uneasy thoughts. Her success at school and her relationship with Michael were now causing suspicion among her classmates, and this made her feel even more isolated. She realized that she had to be more careful. A few weeks passed, and the situation began to get worse. The rumors spread even further, and now even the teachers began to notice that Katherine and Michael were spending too much time together. One day, a colleague of Michael's, a math teacher, came up to him and asked, "Michael, I'd like to talk to you. I know you're working with Katherine on her projects, but maybe we should slow down the frequency of our meetings a little. I don't want to intrude, but some people have questions." Michael knew his colleague didn't mean to blame him, but her words made him think. He realized that the situation was getting worse, and even if there was nothing wrong between him and Katherine, those around him were beginning to see something more in their meetings. He decided that something had to be done to avoid further complications. Meanwhile, Katherine, feeling increasingly isolated at school, began to rely even more heavily on Michael for support. She didn't know that he was also worried about what was happening. She felt that only he understood her and could help her cope with her difficulties. Their meetings became the only place where she felt calm and safe. One evening, Katherine, thinking about everything that had happened in the last few weeks, decided that they needed to cut down on their meetings with Michael to give people less to talk about. She knew that their interactions were making others suspicious, and she didn't want that to lead to more problems. But the thought of having to see less of the man who had become so important to her was painful. The next day, she talked to Michael about it. He agreed with her and said it was the right decision. They agreed to cut down on the number of meetings and try to keep a low profile. They both knew it was necessary to keep the situation from getting out of hand, but each felt it was a decision they hadn't made lightly. Michael, realizing that their relationship had become too close, began to wonder about his future at school. He knew that continuing to see Katherine could jeopardize his career, but he also felt that he couldn't just leave her in such a difficult situation. His inner conflict grew stronger, so their decision to cut back on meetings was an important step in trying to maintain a balance between professional responsibilities and personal emotions. But at the same time, it did not free them from difficulties, and even greater challenges lay ahead. After Katherine and Michael decided to cut back on their meetings, the situation at school did not improve. Rumors continued to spread, and tensions only increased. Katherine noticed that her classmates, who had previously been interested in her progress and even supportive of her, were now increasingly looking at her with suspicion. These glances were becoming more explicit, and the behind-the-scenes talk was becoming louder. Every day she came to school with a feeling of anxiety. Her former confidence, gained from success in competitions and project work, was gradually melting under the weight of the ill will of those around her. Katherine tried to ignore the gossip, but with each passing day it became more and more difficult. Classmates who had previously seemed close to her now avoided communicating with her. She was increasingly alone during breaks, immersing herself in textbooks to somehow distract herself from the tense atmosphere. The history club, which had once been a place of support and inspiration for her, had also changed. When she attended their meetings, it seemed to her that the atmosphere had changed. The guys asked fewer questions, avoided her gaze. At one of the club meetings, when they were discussing a new project, her proposal was met with silence. No one supported her idea, although her proposals had always aroused interest before. It was painful. Michael also began to feel pressure from his colleagues. Some of them were clearly becoming wary of him, even those who had previously supported him. He realized that the rumors were not only damaging his relationship with Katherine, but also threatening his professional reputation. Michael was a man who had always valued his position at the school, and suddenly he found himself the center of unwanted attention. One day, the school principal invited Michael to a conversation. They sat in the office surrounded by silence. The principal, an elderly man with many years of experience, listened to Michael and then quietly and seriously said, "Michael, you know we've started having conversations here. I've always thought of you as a great teacher, but I can't ignore what's going on. Students and parents have started expressing concern about your frequent meetings with one of the students. I know you're a good teacher, but maybe you should reconsider your actions." These words hit Michael harder than he expected. He knew things were getting serious. His colleagues, and now the school administration, were beginning to question his professionalism. He felt like his entire career, which he had worked so hard to build, was about to be destroyed by a misunderstood situation. Michael returned home in a depressed mood. He began to realize that the situation could no longer remain as it was. He had to make a decision that would protect not only his reputation, but also Katherine's future. She must not suffer because of these rumors. At this time, Katherine was going through similar feelings. She felt isolated and alone. Even her parents, who had initially supported her success, began to notice that something was wrong with their daughter. Her mother quietly asked her one evening, "Katherine, what's going on at school? You seem depressed. We hear some strange things, but you don't tell us anything." Katherine didn't know how to answer. She didn't want to worry her parents, and she felt that telling them everything would only make things worse. She decided not to go into details and said that she was simply tired of studying for exams and competitions. Her mother seemed to accept this explanation, but her eyes were full of doubt. One day, after a particularly tough day at school, Katherine and Michael met again in the library. It was one of the rare meetings they had decided to keep. Both were lost in their own thoughts and emotions, and at that moment, Katherine broke down. She told Michael that she could no longer cope with the pressure. She felt like the whole world was against her, that no one understood her, and that she was losing control of her life. "I can't do this anymore," she admitted, her voice shaking. "I try to ignore them, but it's too hard. I don't know what to do." Michael listened to her carefully. He understood that Katherine was in a difficult situation from which she did not know the way out. He also felt that he could no longer leave things as they were. "Katherine," he said quietly but firmly, "we can't let these rumors ruin our lives. I think we should stop seeing each other for a while. It's a hard decision, but I don't see any other way. I don't want your reputation to suffer any further." These words were like a blow to Katherine. She did not expect Michael to suggest that they stop communicating. For her, he was the only person with whom she could be honest and open. She felt that she was losing her support. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she held them back. "I understand," she said quietly, "but it will be very difficult." Michael knew that this decision was difficult for both of them, but he saw no other way out. He needed to protect his career, and Katherine needed to protect her reputation. He suggested that she focus on her studies and prepare for exams, avoiding unnecessary attention. After that meeting, they hardly saw each other anymore. Katherine immersed herself in her studies, trying not to think about what was happening. Her life became filled with textbooks, assignments, and preparation for entering university. She tried to keep herself so busy that she had no time to think about what was happening at school. Michael, for his part, tried to return to the normal life of a teacher. He no longer stayed at school after school and avoided conversations with colleagues who might ask uncomfortable questions. He tried to behave in such a way that no one could reproach him for anything. But inside, he felt empty. He had lost contact with the student he was helping, and he knew that all this was happening because of people's prejudices. The rumors, though they had begun to fade, had left their mark on their lives. Even weeks after their meetings had ceased, Katherine and Michael were still feeling the effects. Now, they each faced a new reality they were forced to live in, and new challenges they had to overcome. Several weeks had passed since Katherine and Michael had decided to stop their regular meetings. Life seemed to be getting better, but the feeling of emptiness remained for both Katherine and Michael. Their communication had abruptly ended, and now each of them was trying to move on alone. However, it was not as easy as it seemed. Katherine threw herself into her studies. She set a goal for herself, to prepare for the entrance exams and finally prove to herself and others that her success was the result of her work and not the consequence of some special relationship with the teacher. From early morning until late evening, her life was filled with study materials, tests, and assignments. Her parents saw that she was completely immersed in her studies, and this calmed them down, although sometimes her mother asked whether she was too busy. But although Katherine tried to hide her feelings behind her studies, she felt a growing loneliness inside. Michael had been more than just a teacher. He had been someone she could share her thoughts and fears with, who had helped her cope with pressure and given her valuable advice. Now, without his support, she had to rely only on herself. She still caught the glances of her classmates, although the rumors had begun to die down. Some were becoming less distrustful of her, but she could not forget how isolated and alone she had felt in recent months. One day, as she sat in the library, deep in her studies, one of her classmates, Thomas, approached her. He hadn't paid much attention to her before, but in recent weeks, Katherine had noticed that he sometimes tried to strike up conversations with her. Thomas was one of those kids who always had friends around him, and his reputation at school was high. "Hello," he said, sitting down next to her. "How are you? You seem very focused." Katherine was a little surprised that he addressed her. She put her textbook down and replied, "Hi, everything is fine, I'm just preparing for exams." Thomas nodded and smiled, adding, "Yes, it is important. I heard that you performed well at the competition. Well done. You must be very tired lately." The question made Katherine think for a moment. She really felt tired, but she didn't want to show it. She wanted to seem strong despite all the difficulties. "A little," she replied, "but that's part of the preparation, isn't it?" Thomas continued, "I heard that you had problems at school. With Michael. I didn't want to ask before, but it all seemed kind of weird. People said a lot, but I don't believe in rumors." These words stung Katherine. She hadn't expected the conversation to go this way, and she felt her heart beat faster. Her face became tense, but she tried to remain calm. "You know, Thomas, people always love to gossip. There was nothing between me and Michael." She paused. "Everything that happened was only related to studies." Thomas nodded, but Katherine noticed that his eyes were full of doubt. He wanted to say something else, but decided not to continue the topic. "Okay," he replied. "If you need anything or just want to talk, let me know." He left, and Katherine was left alone, lost in her thoughts. The conversation reminded her that despite the end of her meetings with Michael, people were still talking about her. The gossip was still alive at school, even if it was now less obvious. Meanwhile, Michael couldn't ignore the aftermath either. His life at school changed. His colleagues were wary of him. Some teachers no longer communicated with him as openly as they had before. He felt that his professional reputation was shaken. Michael knew that his career was on thin ice, Every day he tried to be as careful as possible to avoid situations that might arouse suspicion. After his conversation with the principal, Michael began to avoid any personal contact with his students. He no longer stayed after school, did not conduct extra classes, and during breaks he tried to stay away from talking to students. This was difficult for him since he had always prided himself on being able to build good relationships with his students and help them reach their potential. One evening, when he returned home after another difficult day at school, Michael decided to talk to his friend John, an English teacher with whom he had been on good terms for a long time. They met at a local cafe where they could talk in peace. Michael shared his experiences, telling how everything had changed after the rumors and how his life had become stressful. "You know, John, I don't understand why this happened," Michael began, sipping his coffee. "I just wanted to help Katherine like so many other students. But now, everything has turned upside down. I feel like I've lost all trust." John listened to him attentively, nodding in response. "I understand, Michael, but you always have to be careful in situations like this. People love to make up stories, especially when it comes to someone successful. I also thought it was strange that they took your work with Katherine so seriously. But you have to remember that this is temporary. It will pass." Michael wanted to believe it, but deep down he felt that the effects of these rumors would stay with him for a long time. However, he decided to follow John's advice, to focus on his work and move on despite the difficulties. While Michael was struggling with his situation at work, Katherine was trying to find a new source of support. One day, on her way home from school, she ran into her old friend Emily, with whom she hadn't spoken in a long time. Emily had been her closest friend in elementary school, but their paths had diverged due to different interests. "Katherine!" Emily called, catching up with her on the street. "You've disappeared somewhere. How are you?" Katherine stopped and smiled, though her smile was a little forced. "Hi, Emily. I've just been studying a lot lately. How are you?" "It's okay. I saw you perform at the competition. It was great. We could start dating again like before. How about meeting up this weekend?" These words brought back warm memories for Katherine. She realized that she had really missed socializing with her friends and that she had been isolated for too long. They agreed to meet on Saturday to spend time together. This meeting was exactly what Katherine needed. They went to a cafe together, where they chatted about small things, laughed, and reminisced about old times. Katherine felt the weight of the last few months slowly begin to lift. She had finally found contact with those she cared about again. Returning home, Katherine realized that she was not alone and that despite all the difficulties, she had friends who were ready to support her. This meeting became an important moment in her life, which helped her to begin to rebuild social connections and regain her former confidence. Several months had passed since the regular meetings between Katherine and Michael had ceased. Life seemed to be returning to normal, but the underlying tension that had developed between them and the others had not disappeared. Katherine was still viewed with suspicion by those around her, and even her old friends such as Emily could not fully restore her sense of confidence. Katherine studied hard for her exams, trying not to be distracted by school gossip and suspicious glances. She tried to focus on her goal of going to university and did her best to let her achievements speak for themselves. However, rumors about her relationship with Michael still lingered in the air, and despite her best efforts, she couldn't shake the feeling that people were still talking about her behind her back. Things began to escalate when anonymous posts began appearing on school forums and social media sites detailing the alleged relationship between Katherine and Michael. These posts spread quickly, sparking a new wave of discussion. The comments below the posts were not shy about expressing their opinions, many of which were extremely unpleasant for Katherine. One day, while surfing the internet, Katherine accidentally came across one of these posts. It contained not only distortions of real facts, but also outright fabrications that put her in a very unpleasant position. She felt her heart beat faster. At that moment, it seemed to her that all her efforts to restore her reputation were in vain. Panic and fear enveloped her consciousness. She no longer knew who to trust and who was simply playing along, continuing to build theories behind her back. Katherine couldn't keep quiet. She decided to tell her parents. At dinner, she began carefully, trying to find the right words. "Mom, Dad, I need to talk to you. Lately, there have been strange rumors about me and Michael at school and on the internet. I don't know how to stop it, but it's getting worse." Katherine's parents listened attentively, but immediately became alarmed. They already knew that their daughter had difficulties at school, but they had no idea that the situation had reached such a scale. The father, frowning, said, "We need to talk to the school administration. This is unacceptable. No one has the right to spread false rumors, especially like this." The mother, more emotional, tried to support Katherine, hugging her and trying to calm her down. They agreed to contact the school principal the next day to discuss the situation. Meanwhile, Michael was also dealing with the fallout from the rumors. He began to hear that the rumors about their relationship were back on the rise. His colleagues and school administrators were increasingly distant. Michael tried not to show that it bothered him, but inside he felt the pressure mounting. He knew that his professional reputation was once again at risk. One day, the director called him into his office for another conversation. When Michael entered the office, the director invited him to sit down and, without wasting time, got down to business. "Michael, the situation has escalated. I have been informed that rumors about you and one of your students are spreading on the internet. We cannot ignore such things. I advise you to be careful and think about how to protect yourself and your reputation." Michael nodded, knowing it was best not to argue in this situation. He knew his words would make little difference as long as the rumors continued to spread. However, inside, he felt angry and powerless. No matter how hard he tried to distance himself from Katherine and avoid any suspicious situations, the problem was only getting worse. That evening, when Michael returned home, he sat down at the table and began to consider his next steps. He knew he couldn't just sit back while his reputation was being destroyed. He had to do something, but every step he took could lead to more rumors and further escalation of the situation. He decided that he needed to contact Katherine's parents and ask to meet to discuss his next steps. When he called Katherine's parents, her father agreed to meet. They agreed to meet in a neutral location, a local cafe. Katherine and her parents were present, as was Michael. At the beginning of the conversation, everyone felt a little awkward. Everyone realized how difficult the situation was. Katherine's father spoke first. "Michael, we understand that this is getting out of control. We don't want it to continue, but we don't know how to stop these rumors." Michael nodded and said, "I completely agree with you. I want this to end too. It's ruining my reputation and it's hurting Katherine. Maybe we should consider contacting the school or even a lawyer." Katherine's mother, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. "We can't let this continue. I'm afraid for Katherine's future. These rumors could ruin her life and her chances of going to university." Everyone realized that the problem required an immediate solution, so they decided to act together. They agreed to contact the school principal with an official request to investigate the situation. In addition, they decided to contact the social media administration and try to remove all false messages. In the following days, Michael and Katherine's parents held several meetings with the school principal. The school administration agreed to help resolve the conflict by organizing an internal investigation. It was decided to hold several conversations with students to find out where the rumors came from and who was behind them. For Katherine, this was a particularly stressful time. She had to go through interviews with the administration, explain her position, and defend her reputation. She felt constantly watched, as if her every move was being closely monitored. Despite all this, Katherine tried not to give up. She understood that her future depended on how she dealt with this situation. She continued to study hard for her exams, and at the same time, she fought for her good name. Several weeks passed, and finally, the investigation began to bear fruit. It turned out that rumors about Katherine and Michael were spread by several students who were jealous of her success and were looking for a way to defame her. The school administration had serious talks with them, and it was decided to take disciplinary action against those who participated in spreading false information. Gradually, the rumors began to die down and the atmosphere at school became calmer. Katherine began to reconnect with her classmates and restore her reputation. She felt that, despite all the difficulties, she had managed to get through this ordeal. After months of dealing with false rumors and tensions at school, things finally began to stabilize. The school investigation had yielded results, and those involved in spreading slander about Katherine and Michael were punished. Order returned to the school, and the atmosphere became calmer. Katherine felt the weight that had been weighing on her for months finally begin to lift. She felt like her life was getting back on track. But despite this, her experience had left a deep mark. She had changed, become stronger, more confident, and more prepared to face the challenges that might arise in the future. Katherine continued to prepare for university. Her persistence and determination became even more noticeable, and she now set higher goals for herself. Studying again took a central place in her life, and although it was sometimes difficult, she did not allow herself to give up. Michael also supported her from a distance, but they no longer met on a regular basis as before. Their communication was now formal and limited to school events and projects where Michael's help was needed. However, despite the restoration of calm, Katherine still had unresolved internal issues. She realized that she had changed a lot during this time. The situation with false accusations and constant pressure from classmates and teachers forced her to reevaluate her priorities and reconsider what was truly important to her. One of her biggest discoveries was the realization that she needed to cope better with emotional difficulties. Always focused on her studies and achieving success, Katherine realized that she had lost sight of her emotional stability. She decided to address the issue and asked her parents to help her find a psychologist to discuss how to cope with stress and pressure. Her parents were very supportive of her decision and helped arrange several meetings with a professional. Sessions with a psychologist became an important part of Katherine's recovery journey. Through these conversations, she was able to not only process her experiences related to her difficult situation at school, but also learn how to better cope with future challenges. Katherine realized that her strength came not only from her academic success, but also from her ability to remain resilient in the face of adversity. Meanwhile, Michael continued his work at the school, but he also felt the need to make changes in his life. After the scandal died down, he decided to become less involved in the personal lives of his students to avoid a similar situation happening again. He focused on his teaching and decided to devote more time to his professional development. Michael attended educational seminars and professional development courses, trying to improve his skills as a teacher and mentor without crossing personal boundaries with his students. Soon, it was time for her final school exams. Katherine felt confident. All her preparation efforts, her parents' support, and the help of a psychologist helped her cope with the pressure and focus on the main thing. She spent countless hours with textbooks, in the library, and rehearsing before the exams, and now all that was left was to show everything she had learned. The day of exams arrived. Katherine arrived at school slightly nervous, but she felt prepared. She knew she had done her best, and she believed in herself. The exams went smoothly, and after each one, she felt that her efforts were paying off. Her confidence grew with each passing day, and she could finally breathe a sigh of relief when the final exam was over. Now all that was left was to wait for the results. The wait was nerve-wracking but also liberating. Katherine began seeing friends again, became more involved in school activities, and felt part of the school community again. She no longer felt isolated or suspect, and her relationships with her classmates began to heal. Emily, her old friend, became especially close at this time. They spent a lot of time together, discussed plans for the future, shared experiences and joys. Emily always supported Katherine in difficult moments, and now their friendship became even stronger. Finally, the day of the exam results came. The school hall was full of students waiting for their grades. Katherine sat next to Emily, nervously clasping her hands but at the same time feeling confident in her knowledge. When her name was heard among the top students, she couldn't help but smile. All her efforts paid off. She passed the exams with excellent results. After the results were announced, Katherine approached Michael to thank him for everything he had done for her during this difficult year. She knew that without his support in the early stages, she would not have made it. "Thank you, Michael," she said, holding out her hand. "I couldn't have done this without your help. Thank you for always believing in me." Michael smiled and shook her hand. "You did it all yourself, Katherine. I was just guiding you. You've proven that you're capable of a lot, and this is just the beginning of your journey. I'm sure you have great achievements ahead of you." Now, Katherine had a future ahead of her. She had applied to several prestigious universities and was eagerly awaiting a response. Her confidence in her abilities and her readiness for new challenges grew with each passing day. It was a new stage in her life, and although she had gone through many difficulties, Katherine realized that each challenge had made her stronger and wiser. She had learned to cope with difficulties, to work on herself, and not to give up in the face of obstacles. Her story was not over yet, but she already knew that she was ready for new heights. After successfully passing her exams and finishing the school year, Katherine's life began to take on a more stable and predictable shape. But even more important events lay ahead, entering university and starting a new chapter in her life. Each day, despite the long-awaited feeling of completing one stage, was filled with anticipation and excitement. Katherine had already applied to several prestigious universities, including ones she had dreamed of since the beginning of her high school career. But now she was faced with another problem, waiting for a response. Time passed slowly, and although Katherine tried to find something to do, her thoughts often returned to what her future would be. She knew that all her efforts over the past few years had to lead to this moment, but that didn't make the wait any less stressful. Meanwhile, Katherine decided to use this time to unwind and recharge. She began spending more time with her family, who were happy to see her calm and focused again. Her father suggested that she go to the family's country house for a few weeks to get away from the bustle of the city and recharge her batteries before starting a new phase of her life. Katherine agreed, realizing that she really needed some time to relax and get her thoughts in order. A country house had always been a place of solitude and peace for her, where she could enjoy nature, read books, or simply reflect on life. This offer was just right. The trip to the countryside was just what she needed. Away from the noise of the city, she spent time walking through the forests and fields, enjoying the silence and solitude. She began to breathe easier and was able to release the tension that had built up over the past months. One of the highlights of these weeks for Katherine were the long evening conversations she had with her father. They would often sit on the porch, watching the sunset and discuss her plans for the future. Her father would share his experiences with her, tell stories of how he had dealt with life's challenges, and give her advice he thought she could use in the future. "You know, Katherine," he said one evening, "life is full of surprises. Sometimes what you plan may not come true, but that doesn't mean you failed. Everything that happens is a new experience that makes you stronger. I've seen how much you've grown lately, and I'm proud of the way you've handled the challenges." Katherine listened to him, and her heart was filled with warmth. These conversations helped her to further strengthen her faith in herself and her abilities. Her worries about the future began to dissipate, and she felt that despite the uncertainty, she was ready for anything. Returning to the city after a few weeks in the country, Katherine was filled with new energy and optimism. She realized that no matter which university accepted her, she was ready to take on any challenge and continue moving towards her goal. When she got home, she had one of those moments that defines her future. On the table was a letter from one of the universities she had applied to. It was her first response. Catherine's heart beat faster and her hands shook slightly as she opened the envelope. Inside was a standard letter, but the words she read would forever be etched in her mind. She had been accepted. This was one of the universities she had high hopes for. It wasn't her dream university, but it was a great option, and she couldn't help but smile. Her efforts had paid off, and now new opportunities were opening up for her. That same day, Katherine shared the news with her parents and friends. They were happy for her, congratulated her, and supported her choice. However, Katherine had several more universities she was waiting to hear from, and she decided to wait a little before making her final decision. A few days later, when she returned home from her meeting with Emily, another surprise was waiting for her. Another letter, but this time from the university she had dreamed of from the very beginning. It was the one she most wanted to go to, but was not sure if she would be accepted. Her heart began to beat wildly again. A feeling of excitement filled her, and gathering her thoughts, she slowly opened the envelope. She looked at the lines, afraid to believe her eyes, and suddenly her eyes widened. She was accepted. This moment was the culmination of all her efforts. Katherine could not believe that her dream had come true. She realized that all those months of struggle, doubts, hard work, and nervous experiences had led her to this moment. Her parents, upon learning the news, could not hide their joy and pride for their daughter. "We knew you could do it," her mother said, hugging her. "You deserve it with your persistence." This moment became a symbol for Katherine of her overcoming all the difficulties she had experienced at school. She understood that new challenges were ahead, but she was ready for them as never before. Now that all her doubts were behind her, Katherine began planning her new life. She began collecting the necessary documents for admission, discussing financial matters with her parents, and preparing for the move to another city. Her future was becoming clearer, and she could not wait for the moment when the new chapter of her life would begin. For Katherine, these last weeks before school started were not only a time of preparation, but also a time of reflection on everything she had been through. She learned a lot about herself and what it means to be strong, to be able to cope with pressure and to move forward despite all obstacles. Michael was also happy for Katherine when he learned that she had gotten into university. They exchanged short congratulatory messages, and although their paths were now diverging, they both knew that their communication had played an important role in each other's lives. Michael felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that he had helped someone achieve their goal, despite all the difficulties. Katherine, for her part, felt grateful for the experiences she had gained in recent years. Now that she was on the threshold of a new life, her self-confidence was stronger than ever. She knew there were still many obstacles ahead, but now she knew how to overcome them. After receiving an acceptance letter to the university of her dreams, Katherine's life began to change rapidly. Preparing for this new stage was intense and required her concentration. She and her parents began discussing all the practical details, moving to another city, choosing a place to live, completing all the paperwork, and preparing for the entrance events. Despite the excitement and the sense of impending change, Katherine also felt a sense of freedom. Her efforts had paid off, and now she felt that she was truly ready for this new step. The first step was finding a place to live. The university offered options for dorms, and although Katherine initially considered renting an apartment, after discussing it with her parents, she decided that living in a dorm would be a great way to meet new people and immerse herself in student life. She was nervous about how she would adapt to the new environment, but she believed she could cope. Her parents helped her choose a room, and within a few days, she knew where she was going. The move was one of those events that filled Katherine's home with both joy and sadness. Her mother, packing her things, could not hide her excitement because their daughter was leaving for another city. Although she was proud of Katherine, she found it difficult to say goodbye to her daughter. Her father, despite his emotions, tried to remain calm, helping with organizational issues and encouraging Katherine. On moving day, the house was bustling with activity. Katherine and her parents loaded the car with suitcases, boxes of books, and things she would need for university. It was a momentous moment for everyone. As they drove towards the university, they talked about what the future held for Katherine, how she would cope with new challenges. Her parents assured her that they would always be in touch and ready to help at any time. When they arrived on campus, Katherine felt a wave of excitement and anxiety at the same time. This was the moment she had been waiting for so long, and now she was on the threshold of a new life. The huge campus buildings, the lively students walking around the campus, all seemed new and exciting to her. She imagined how many possibilities were opening up before her, and at the same time, she wondered how she would fit into this new environment. The check-in process was quick. Katherine received the keys to her dorm room and headed there with her parents. The dorm was spacious and cozy, and Katherine immediately began unpacking her things. Her room, although small, looked comfortable. She was soon joined by her roommate, Lily, an energetic and sociable girl who, as it turned out, was also from out of town and was studying in a faculty close to Katherine's major. "Hi," Lily said happily when they met. "I'm so glad I'm going to have a roommate. I really hope we can be friends." Katherine smiled back. She felt that Lily could be her friend in this new world. "Hi, I'm glad too," Katherine replied. "This is my first time living away from home, so I hope we can support each other." Katherine's parents helped their daughter set up the room, and then it was time to say goodbye. It was a touching moment. The mother couldn't hold back her tears as she hugged her daughter, and the father, although he tried to remain composed, was also emotional. "We're always here," he said, squeezing her shoulders. "If you need anything, call. Don't forget that this is just the beginning, and you've already proven that you can handle anything." Katherine squeezed his hand, feeling deeply grateful for the support they had given her throughout their journey. When her parents left, Katherine was left alone in her new room, feeling that her life had finally changed. It was both scary and inspiring. She knew that she was now in charge of her own life, and this step into a new life was an important stage she had to go through. The next few days were filled with new acquaintances, orientation events, and preparation for the academic process. Lily became a real source of support for her. They quickly hit it off and began exploring the campus together, participating in student activities and meeting other students. Soon the first classes began. University life turned out to be intense and demanding, but Katherine was ready for it. Her schedule was tightly packed with lectures, seminars, and group work. It was not easy for her to adapt to the new format of education, but she delved into each subject with interest, gradually getting drawn into the process. The first few weeks of school were a whirlwind of new experiences. Katherine met her teachers, made new friends, and dove head-on into her studies. Unlike school, the students were more mature and serious, and the atmosphere was more creative and supportive. She found that her new social circle was much more diverse. People came from all over the country and the world, and everyone brought something unique to the table. But despite all the newness and excitement, Katherine still felt a little empty. At times, she found herself thinking about the past, about school, about Michael, about the difficulties she had gone through. These memories gave her strength, reminding her that she had dealt with difficult situations before and had overcome them. One evening, after a particularly busy day, Katherine decided to take a walk around campus to unwind and clear her head. As she strolled through the shady paths, she reflected on how far she had come in the last few years. Life was changing, but she had learned to be flexible, to find the strength to adapt, and to move forward despite all the obstacles. Back in her room, she sat down at her desk and decided to write a letter to Michael. Even though they hadn't spoken in a long time, Katherine felt she needed to thank him for the important role he played in her life. She wrote a short but heartfelt letter, sharing her successes and expressing gratitude for his support in the past. "I couldn't have gotten to this point without you," she wrote. Thank you for believing in me in the first place. It means the world to me." After sending the letter, Katherine felt relieved. She was no longer tied to the problems of the past. Her life was now her own, and she looked to the future with confidence. After her first few weeks at university, Katherine's life began to stabilize. Her studies became increasingly intense, but she felt herself gradually settling into a new rhythm. Her days were filled with lectures, seminars, meetings with friends, and independent work in the library. The university atmosphere was everything she had dreamed of, varied, full of new opportunities and challenges. One evening, after a long day of classes, Katherine and Lily were sitting in their dorm doing homework. Katherine suddenly thought about how much her life had changed in the last few months. She turned to Lily and asked, "Have you ever thought about how much life can change in just 1 year?" Lily smiled and nodded. "Every day, Katherine. That's the whole point of life. You never know where it's going to take you." Katherine realized that Lily was right. The university provided her with the opportunity not only for academic growth, but also for personal growth. She began to participate in various student clubs and activities, gradually discovering new interests. One club she became particularly interested in was the debate club, where students discussed important social and political issues. Katherine had always been interested in the stories of great speakers and thinkers, but debating was something new for her. She wasn't sure she would be able to express herself convincingly in front of an audience, but her desire to grow and try new things outweighed her fear. Debate Club attracted her with its intellectual atmosphere and the opportunity to learn from other students. At the first meeting of the club, she met a senior named Alex, who was one of the leaders of the debate movement at the university. Alex was charismatic and self-confident. His speech was always clear and convincing. He immediately noticed Katherine and approached her after the meeting. "Hi," he said, holding out his hand. "I'm Alex. You're new to the club, aren't you? What a great idea to join. Have you ever debated before?" Katherine was a little embarrassed, but tried to answer confidently. "Hi, I'm Katherine. Yes, this is my first meeting. I've never debated before, but I'm interested in trying." Alex smiled and said, "Great. You'll have plenty of opportunities. We're preparing for the university debate next month. Why don't you try participating? It's a great way to get your feet wet." Katherine thought about it. She had always been afraid of public speaking, but she knew that it could be an important step in her personal growth. After some thought, she decided, "Okay, I'll try." The next few weeks were filled with preparation for the debate. Katherine studied the topics, prepared arguments, learned how to express her thoughts and defend her position. Alex and other club members helped her cope with difficulties by giving advice and organizing training. It was difficult for her at first. Early training showed that Katherine was nervous in front of an audience and sometimes lost confidence when faced with criticism. However, she did not give up. Every time she felt her fears were getting the better of her, she remembered the difficulties she had already overcome in her life, and this gave her the strength to continue. Gradually, her confidence grew. Alex became her mentor and helped her develop her argumentation and public speaking skills. He told her, "Don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's part of the process. The best speakers also started with mistakes. The main thing is to learn from them and not be afraid to speak." These words became a real source of inspiration for Katherine. She realized that success comes through hard work and practice. Her speeches became more confident and powerful. She began to find joy in debating and realized that it was not only an intellectual challenge but also an opportunity to better understand herself and her beliefs. The day of the university debate arrived. Katherine felt her heart pounding in her chest as she stood backstage. It was her first public debate tournament, and she was filled with anxiety. But instead of letting her fear get the better of her, she decided to use it as a source of energy. She took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. Her opponents were seasoned club members, but Katherine didn't let that intimidate her. She began with a clear and confident speech, making arguments she had been preparing for weeks. Her voice was loud and clear, and her thoughts were clear. During cross-questioning, she deftly parried her opponent's arguments, showing that she was ready for any challenge. When the debate was over, Katherine felt a huge sense of relief. She had done it. She had overcome her fear and stood before an audience without losing her confidence. Although the results of the debate had not yet been announced, for her it was already a victory. After the performance, Alex approached her, smiling. "Well done, Katherine. You did a great job. I'm proud of how you performed." These words meant a lot to her. Katherine felt that she was not only able to become part of the debate club, but also found strengths within herself that she had never known she had. At that moment, she realized that she could overcome any challenge if she believed in herself and worked hard. That evening, she and Lily went to a party organized for all the debaters. It was a relaxing and joyful evening. Katherine felt part of something bigger, part of a student life in which she was not only learning but also discovering new sides of herself. Upon returning home, Katherine reflected again on how much her life had changed in recent years. She realized that university had become not only a place for her to study, but also a place for personal growth, for new acquaintances and experiences. She no longer feared the future. On the contrary, she looked forward to what it would bring. Katherine felt like her new life was just beginning, and she was ready to use every moment to become better, smarter, and stronger. There was no longer any fear of challenges in her heart, only a desire to move forward. After her triumphant performance at the university debate, Katherine's life changed. She felt her self-confidence increase, which had a positive impact not only on her studies, but on every other aspect of her life. Every day brought new challenges, but Katherine no longer feared them. She knew that any difficulties could be overcome if she worked hard and was not afraid to take risks. Her performance was recognized as one of the best among the newcomers in the debate club. Alex and the other members of the club praised her abilities, and the club began preparing for the next university competition, where Katherine would play an even more important role. She realized that she had found something more than just a hobby. Debating had become a real passion for her, and she was now actively involved in preparing for new tournaments. One day after class, Katherine went to the student library to continue working on her new project. She had already made friends with the professors, and her research was becoming more and more profound. Her work was receiving positive feedback, and one day, one of the professors, Dr. Franklin, invited her for a private consultation. "Katherine," the professor began as she entered his office, "I wanted to talk to you about your work. Have you heard about the academic conference next semester?" Katherine nodded. She had heard about the conference, but she didn't think she was ready to participate in such a large-scale event. However, the professor continued, "I think you could present one of your researches at this conference. You have potential, and I see how hard you try. You can discuss the results of your researches with the academic community and gain important experience." Katherine was surprised and flattered. She did not expect that her work could be appreciated at such a level, but the professor's offer aroused her genuine interest. "But Professor," she said, "I'm not even sure my work is good enough for a conference like this. There will be professors and doctoral students presenting, and I'm just a student." Dr. Franklin smiled and replied, "Everyone once started with the first step. You have already proven that you are capable of speaking in front of an audience, and you can present your project not only to students, but also to professionals in your field. I see in you a desire for knowledge, and you deserve this opportunity. Think about it. You have time to prepare." Katherine considered the professor's offer. It was another challenge, but she realized that if she didn't take it now, she might miss out on an important moment in her academic career. She decided to give it a try. Her research project was on the history of social movements, a topic she considered important and relevant. The professor agreed to supervise her preparation, helping her refine her work and prepare for the conference. Meanwhile, Katherine's relationships with her classmates and debate club members continued to grow. Lily became her best friend and supported her in all her endeavors. In their free time, they explored campus together, attended student events, and even went on a short weekend camping trip with other friends. These moments helped Katherine relax and feel like she was part of a community. One day, while sitting on a park bench with Lily, Katherine shared her thoughts. You know, I would never have thought that I would find myself here, on the threshold of such great opportunities. A year ago, I couldn't even imagine that I would participate in debates or present my project at a conference. Lily smiled and replied, Katherine, you built this path yourself. You've always been driven. We all see how much work you've put into getting here. You deserve these opportunities. Katherine knew Lily was right. All the difficulties she had overcome had become important lessons for her, and now she was not just participating in university life, but actively shaping it. Preparations for the conference were in full swing. Katherine worked on her project every day, discussed details with the professor, and prepared a presentation. Her work included not only theoretical analysis but also real research, which she conducted using university archives and interviews with experts. This was a new experience for her, but she immersed herself in the process with interest. As the day of the conference approached, Katherine felt more and more responsible for her presentation. She wanted to do more than just present her project, but to make it an important contribution to the academic community. Every evening she rehearsed her speech, analyzing her arguments and preparing for potential questions from the audience. The day of the conference arrived. The university auditorium was filled with students, professors, and invited guests. Katherine walked onto the stage with a slight nervousness, but as in the debate, she used this nervousness as a source of energy. When she began to speak, her voice was firm and confident. She expressed her thoughts clearly, cited examples from her research, and answered questions with ease. The presentation was a success. After it was over, Katherine felt a great sense of relief and pride that she had managed to overcome another important challenge. Several teachers approached her after the presentation to discuss her work and give valuable advice. It was a new experience for her to communicate with professionals who appreciated her work. But what inspired her most was that she was able to use her knowledge and show what she could do. It was more than just attending a conference. It was a step towards a new stage in her academic career. After the conference, Katherine received an invitation to participate in another research project under the supervision of Professor Franklin. This offer was confirmation for her that she was moving in the right direction. New horizons were now opening up before her, and she was looking forward to what the future would bring. That night, as she walked back to her dorm, Katherine thought again about how much her life had changed in the last year. She was no longer the insecure schoolgirl who doubted her abilities. She was now a confident, goal-oriented student who knew what she wanted and was willing to fight for her dreams. Lily, seeing her in the room, asked, "How are you? Tired?" Katherine smiled and replied, "Yes, a little tired, but very happy. I feel like this is just the beginning. There is so much ahead." Lily nodded and added, "You and I will cope with everything that awaits us. You have already proven it." Katherine no longer doubted. Her path had been full of challenges, but now she knew that she was capable of much. She looked to the future with confidence, realizing that every step only made her stronger. After her successful presentation at the academic conference, Katherine's life became even more eventful. Now she was surrounded not only by new friends and students, but also by teachers with whom she maintained regular communication. Her research project was highly praised, and Professor Franklin suggested that she continue working in this direction, participating in more complex academic research. For Katherine, this was a real breakthrough. Every day she felt that she was making steps not only in the academic sphere, but also in personal development. All those fears and insecurities that she had experienced before began to recede. She understood that now she had all the necessary tools to cope with any difficulties. One of the most significant events in her life was an offer from one of the universities to do a summer internship abroad. It was something that Katherine could not even dream of. The internship offered the opportunity to work in a research group studying contemporary social movements and political changes in different countries. Her research fit perfectly into this project, and Katherine was invited to an interview. When she received the invitation, she was excited and a little nervous. Interning abroad was a huge step. It meant she would be able to apply her knowledge internationally, immerse herself in a new culture, and work with leading scientists in her field. Lily, as always, was there to support her. "You can do it. This is what you've been working towards. Even if this interview seems tough, you've already proven that you can handle the toughest challenges. Just be yourself." Katherine took Lily's words to heart. She knew her journey had not been easy, but every challenge had made her stronger. She began preparing for the interview, working through all the possible questions and studying the specifics of the program she had been invited to. The day of the interview arrived. Katherine sat down in front of a panel of university representatives and confidently began answering questions. Her preparation and previous experience helped her present herself in the best possible light. She talked about her participation in conferences, her research, and how she saw her role in the project. When the interview was over, Katherine felt relieved. She knew she had done everything she could to demonstrate her knowledge and readiness to work in an international team. Now, all she had to do was wait for an answer. Meanwhile, she continued to participate in university life. The debate club became a second family for her, and Katherine enjoyed spending time with her friends. Her success in debate made her more confident, and now she not only competed in tournaments, but also helped other newcomers who, like her at the beginning, were afraid to go on stage. Professor Franklin continued to supervise her academic activities. He noticed that Katherine had potential for further study at the graduate level, and suggested that she consider continuing her education after completing her undergraduate degree. This was a great compliment to Katherine, and although she was not yet sure whether she was ready for such a step, the thought began to occupy her mind. One day, a few weeks after the interview, Katherine received the long-awaited letter from the university where she had applied for an internship. Her heart beat faster when she opened the letter. The lines in it brought her real joy. She had been accepted. The summer internship abroad was now a reality, and Katherine stood on the threshold of a new stage in her life. She immediately called her parents to share the news. Her father, hearing that she had been accepted, could not hide his pride. "We always believed in you, Katherine. You deserve it. You've put in so much work and now it's paying off. Your mom and I are so proud of you." The mother, as always, could not contain her emotions. "We knew you could do it. We're always here for you, and if you need anything, just say so, but I'm sure you can handle it." Katherine felt that this internship would be the moment that would change her life. It was not just an opportunity to work in an international team. It was recognition as a scientist, as a person capable of many things. She knew that this internship would be an important step towards her dreams. Before leaving, she decided to meet Lily and her friends from the debate club to say goodbye. In the evening, they had a small party where everyone shared their plans for the future and the fun moments that had happened in the past months. Lily, of course, was the main organizer. "Katherine, you are our star now. I am so proud of you, and I am sure that this is only the beginning. You will return with new knowledge, and perhaps some of us will decide to follow your example." Katherine smiled, feeling the warmth and support of her friends. These people had become an important part of her life at university, and even though she was about to embark on a new chapter, she knew they would always be there for her. On the last day before leaving, Katherine packed her things and boarded the train that would take her to a new world. She sat by the window, watching the landscape slowly change outside. Thoughts of the past floated through her mind. Those difficult days at school, the rumors and gossip, how she had overcome all obstacles. Now, sitting on the train, she realized that each difficulty was a step towards this moment that had arrived. Katherine looked at the road and felt that all her fears and doubts were left behind. She had grown as a person, found her calling, and was ready for new challenges. New countries, new projects, and new achievements were waiting for her ahead. Her story was just beginning. She no longer doubted her abilities and knew that she could achieve everything she had planned. Katherine was ready for the future, and her path was open to new achievements.